Good day, this is Gaidar Forum, Russia and the World and the Priorities. And this is the panel discussion which is entitled Sustainable Development, Challenges, Threats and Opportunities for the Tourism Industry. My name is Sangadzhi Tarbaev. I'm a chairman of the Committee on Tourism and Tourism Infrastructure of the State Duma. And now I'll introduce our guests. First of all, Director of Tourism, Environment and Climate Initiatives, Agency for Strategic Initiatives, Olga Zakharova. Head of Altai Republic, Oleg Khorokhordin. Chairperson, Moscow Tourism Committee, Ekaterina Pronicheva. And Igor Kobzev. He is the governor of Irkutsk region. So this is our panel, and we are going to talk about a rather challenging topic today, which I've mentioned already. And now I'd like to give you more details about this topic. Sustainable development term has lots of different interpretations, but the main idea here is the following. In the past 30 years, I would start from the conference of the UN in Rio de Janeiro, when this topic was mentioned as the priority for the first time. We talk about the damage on the environment, damage to the biodiversity, social and cultural sphere. And during these 30 years, we've been discussing some conditions for economic development that would minimize this damage or would ensure some benefits for the environment. And we understand that on the one hand, this is the very big trend, but on the other hand, that's the populism topic. Some people think that this really the topic which is critically important for the environment. But I would say that in the last couple of years, this discussion has reached the new urgency because countries of the EU recently announced that they are going to introduce carbon border tax on different products, which are not in line with the ESG standards. And ESG, that's the same what we call in Russia, in the Russian language, sustainable development. And this actually gave the new boost to this discussion of the sustainable development. This is really a very big priority in different levels of discussion. And today our focus will be on tourism. Everyone who is here, everyone who works in tourism, you know that it covers about 50 industries, and all these new standards, this new trend, which I've mentioned, these new conditions for the development, they would influence the tourism industry, among others. According to statistics, we know that tourism ensures damage, and it can be detrimental to the environment, and this contribution is about 5% for the global warming. We know that now the tourism industry is growing. This is the general trend. For example, the growth of the economy is about 3% in Russia, and the growth of tourism globally is 5 to 6%. Sorry, 3% globally, and tourism globally 5 to 6%. And we know that in Russia right now we are at a stage. Oh, I don't need this headphones. It's not very convenient. So in Russia we are now talk about the development of tourism. So, for example, there is a special committee at the State Duma dedicated to tourism, and we have some special authorities working with tourism at the level of the federation, at the level of the regions. And in the next 3 years, we will have lots of money invested for the development infrastructure, and we are going to talk about possible boosts for the development of the industry, domestic and inbound travel, or possibly we don't need to pay attention to such trends, ESG, and without taking into account such trends, tourism industry can't develop, and we want to learn more from expert community. And I think that this will be the end of my overall background information. And now I'd like to move on to the discussion with our panelists. First, Olga, you have the floor, and my question to you is the following. I spoke with you before the session. I realized that you have a very pragmatic and rational position. You have the floor. That would be great that at this panel we have representatives of the regions, and we do have them here, those who represent authorities, and it would be great to have businesses, those who implement the solutions. Sustainable development and ESG, that's the growing trend. Yes, this is growing. It was growing in the last 5 years. And the agenda was in the active focus for marketing specialists, because we see that there are lots of social, environmental events introduced. There are new prizes and awards which are given to companies who deal with sustainable development. And consumers are also interested in sustainable tourism. According to Booking.com, 61% of Russians would like to get more information about sustainable facilities. They would like to know how money they pay to hotels are used for the development of communities. Booking.com launched the whole program. It's called the Green Leaf. It's not just the gray leaf, that's the guideline, the whole big guideline for hotels, which lets the hotels understand which solutions should be there implemented, which solutions they can implement in the future. This is really a very big list of measures. Possibly, right now, this discussion about tourism, our panel that we are having today, is organized too early for Russia. For tourism in Russia, the system of certification is not present. We do not have criteria, we do not have rules, criteria which could be measurable. So I would say that's more like charity or social responsibility, but not the economic factor that would allow businesses to save money and move forward. We need to talk about it, because right now no one has good understanding of what can be done, and the regional and federal authorities, they don't understand what's sustainable tourism and what are the signs of it. And businesses don't understand it as well. And as I've said, there are lots of disputes. We do not have really the feeling that this topic is taken seriously. If we use this term on a permanent basis, we constantly continue discussing the sustainable development, we can get as a result one-off activities. So it's like a PR event, then we talk about it, and then we look like a responsible companies. In Russia, there are 30 hotels which could be called as companies implementing the measures of sustainable development. And in Greece, for example, there are 600 hotels like that. Of course, the sustainable development agenda is going to influence the global agenda, but we need to have these principles more clearly defined. We are already in the process of this sustainable tourism development. We should understand that this is a very long-term project, a long-term journey. You can't do something very quickly and then say that, okay, our development is now sustainable forever. We have a great room for improvement, because we are in the 65th place out of 99 places according to Euro monitoring company. In 2020, they had a big research, and you see the position of Russia in this rating. What's the problem of businesses? They don't see any economic efficiency. On the one hand, environmental decisions are rather expensive and they have very long term of return. So, for example, if a company wants to implement some solutions, sustainable solutions for hotels or for restaurants, there are no resources, portals where you could read about the list of decisions and solutions. Implement them and you'll be sustainable. That's just non-existent. If it's possible to reduce costs and improve profits, then businesses will be moving towards sustainability. I've checked some analytical research, and I know that there are some small hotels being built because people are more interested in cozy, small spaces, hotels with 150 rooms. And if you implement sustainable development principles, you can save huge amount of money, say no to plastic. You can reduce costs on food if you implement the system of managing food waste, but you need economic rationale for that. And here everything is not good. So on the one hand, we don't have a lot of decisions, and also there is no clear understanding of the economic efficiency of such decisions, solutions. We have some projects, those which implement sustainable development decisions. I wouldn't say that they are best practices or some super projects. But you can give examples such as Krasnaya Polyana in Sochi, for example. They use energy efficiency solutions and they reduced the use of electricity significantly and the use of water. Azimut chain of hotels, they use more environmentally friendly cosmetics. Buryatia chain of hotels, they recycle waste and they reduce their carbon footprint by 20,000 tons. So they use they give all the waste to recycling. Bjorn restaurant, they use lean production principles, reducing waste in the kitchen. 20% of vegetables and fruit, they are not used by end consumers. And this restaurant decided that they have some things which do not look nice. For example, chocolate pie, which can't be sold but in the restaurant, but it could be used still and used in marketing. Ecopole farm, another example. I don't want to talk about S7 airline and some other examples. There is another project, airport of Chattanooga City in Tennessee. This is the first airport in the States that uses exclusively solar power. And they have so much power. First of all, they save 1 megawatt of electricity, and this electricity, which is extra, is used for villages. So they give light to smaller towns, to villages nearby. This is a very interesting example. Sustainable tourism is not a threat, is not a challenge. That's common sense of each human, of businesses, of state authorities. That's not a challenge, that's a normal state. That's good. It's possible to make sure that when we do something, it doesn't harm future generations. And what could be done to achieve that in the future? Rostourism is working together with the regions, providing interbudgetary transfers of money to support entrepreneurs. But as of now, I don't see the interest from some regions. They don't have the set of criteria and support measures in order to make sure that entrepreneurs can implement green solutions. This is like upgrade. And if we do that, if we stimulate businesses, if we provide good grants for them and they create projects of the future, then we won't be living on the projects of the past and of the present. We will be upgrading existing infrastructure. Upgrade is possible. A lot has been built, and we need to make sure that we build something new. We need 3 to 5 years for creating something new, but you need to make sure that we think about existing projects. And these entrepreneurs, they are experienced. We can upgrade existing facilities, creating more modern ones. We need to enshrine principles of sustainable development, creating measurable criteria. What are the blocks that exist there for sustainable development? I don't think that you will be able to create such blocks. For example, there is a recycling block or waste management block. For the waste management block, here we can save, we can reduce noise, light noise and sound noise. So there are the things which are already done by businesses, but they don't know that they are also called principles of sustainable development. We can create lots of lights for the national parks, and there will be no birds living. They will leave the national parks. This wouldn't be reasonable if we want to develop such zones. So I wouldn't say that there is something new. Sustainable development, that's not something critically different. That's just common sense when managing specific facilities and objects. Last year, there were lots of projects launched by the government, and we need to make sure that when managing such projects, we create something that will be in demand by our consumers in 20, 30 years. That's not something that what is used right now. Glampings are popular now, but are they going to look like sustainable business models in the future? Thank you very much. So you said that this topic for discussion is too early for Russia. But if I understood you correctly, we need to create the correct system of voluntary certification, right? Yes, you managed some of the projects implemented in Russia. It means that some processes are going on and businesses know about international trends and they follow suit. And now I'd like to give the floor to the head of the Altai Republic, Mr. Khorokhordin. Can you please tell us? So, Ms. Zakharova gave us some helicopter view on this topic, but you are working in a specific region. You have great natural reserves there, and it would be interesting to know your viewpoint. Thank you very much. Good day, everyone. As Olga said, sustainable tourism, this term has different interpretations. For Altai Republic, we have a wide understanding of this term. There's not just a tourism on the territories which are preserved by the state. We are thinking about preserving biodiversity, creating new jobs with good salaries, and preserving local cultures and communities, history, traditions, and so on. And for Altai Republic, for the tourism development is critically important because for us, tourism has a multiplication effect. Igor, we worked with you about the Siberia Agreement, so we create additionally, when creating one job in tourism, 5 jobs in some other industries. And Altai is really in great demand for tourism. We have about 2 million citizens regularly, and the number of tourists grow on a regular basis. So for us, it's important to ensure the balance between restrictions and being hospitable. According to different estimates of experts, Right now, we see a very intensive development. So we've done some polls among Russians, and we see that more and more Russians are thinking about taking care of the environment. And experts say that if this is a tourism that has some knowledge component, environmental knowledge component, this is also what is in great demand. I constantly say that the environment is the competitive factor. That's the fact of life. We do a lot in order to reduce the anthropological influence on the environment. What do we need to do? We need to reduce this anthropological burden on the environment while maintaining local culture and communities. We want to control tourism flows, linking them with existing infrastructure. So there are some tourism routes, and along these routes we have convenient garbage bins and special signs. We give out leaflets about behavior in natural reserves.
We are trying to label the archaeologically important objects because, vandalism is very easy to commit, but it's difficult to remove the consequences. For example, in Altai, the passages over the hills are very important, and people tie ribbons sometimes to mark their presence in those places. And in fact, it is very offensive. Local population take that as an offense almost. When we say that the touristic routes are linked to the infrastructure, we mean that we need to provide tourists with opportunities to taste the local cuisine and to get some local experience. And here is what sustainable tourism means here. We need to provide sustainable offer there. Now, take our hospitality industry, both big hotels and local guest houses. We try to convince them to handle waste properly, especially in what relates to plastic. They need to clean up plastic waste. And then, for example, there are other green solutions like using photovoltaic panels. For example, in the Republic of Altai, there is only one photovoltaic station. Then, at the same time, we see that even though this station generates lots of electricity, much more than we consume, nevertheless, the cost of this electricity is quite high. But it's green. For now, we use various energy sources. We use heat energy, but according to the investors' assessment and their estimate of photovoltaic, the solar energy generated by these stations will be comparable to other sources too. So that is how we can transition to green energy soon. I am convinced that very soon the touristic companies and other organizations in the regions that do not comply with green economy principles, they will be cut from state and other support sources. So if you look at the future of tourism, from our point of view, from the point of view of the Republic of Altai, you said that tourism takes up 5% in the overall distribution. According to my sources, in fact, tourism globally takes up 8% of all greenhouse gases emitted all across the world. So this business leaves a huge carbon footprint. Today, Lenovo sells their computers and They, together with that, sell you a device that is able to offset the carbon footprint. That's the future. A tourism that will be traveling to the Altai Republic or to Irkutsk, they will be offered to buy a carbon offset. Of course, that will be a voluntary scheme, but responsible tourism, and that's the type of people we are waiting for, they will be doing so. They will be buying these offsets, and then we will be using this money in order to implement sustainable development measures in tourism. Well, thank you very much. In fact, what you've just outlined in the last few sentences, that looks like legislative initiatives, so you're very welcome to us. You can first discuss everything with experts, and then we can take it up to the State Duma. So thank you very much for this opinion, the point of view of Altai Republic. Now it's over to Igor Ivanovich. He represents Irkutsk region. Thank you very much. Thank you, dear colleagues, and thanks to the audience. In fact, Irkutsk is very lucky. We have the Baikal Lake, we have Taiga, and every third Russian citizen dreams of visiting the Baikal Lake, and well, that's approximately 50 million people. So we understand that today the demand in terms of domestic tourism, it spurs up the regional authorities and federal authorities. That is why we need to indeed come up with our position on that. So what's our view today? Today in Irkutsk region, our tourism gives and offers plenty of propositions. We have a very specific economic situation and geographical location, and that's what explains our particularities. We're just at the set out of this development, and colleagues, they said that they've already covered this initial stage. We are still there. We have a lot of problems that we have to address. For example, probably you know about the paper-producing factory that is located at the Baikal Lake and that generates lots of waste. Then we need to come up with the infrastructure to receive people in those areas. So we need to develop our hospitality industry, because providing accommodations to people that harms the environment. Then, of course, we need to organize that in an integrated infrastructure to provide proper accommodation, to provide communication and other utilities. That's a whole bunch of different goals, and but that's what we are going to do. We are going to have approximately 3 million people in terms of our tourism industry capacity. I'm talking about Irkutsk and Baikal. Those are our focal points. But right you are, we need to proceed quickly with implementing all these measures, otherwise it will be too late. Then, of course, we have to consider that we are a UNESCO-protected object. They have a global understanding of how we need to preserve this lake. We have a federal law that is aiming at preserving the Baikal Lake, and that's an important piece of legislation. I already told Sangadzhi today that we have a threat of natural disasters happening in our regions. Sometimes we cannot promptly provide proper protection against natural disasters, and at the same time we have to come up with the measures aimed at that. So developing the agenda for our future, for the future update of the measures being implemented, I think that indeed we need to act both at the federal level, and here we are ready to take an active part in that. Then we need to look at the economic development as well. And, in Irkutsk, we historically have a very active entrepreneurial association and community. Entrepreneurs are our main agents, the main agents of our economy. Then, of course, we need to look at the environment too. Today, our government commission that looks at the protection and preservation of the Baikal Lake, the commission is led by Mr. Abramchenko. This commission, during its last session, they have taken a decision to ban the disposal of household waste in that area altogether. That's an important decision. And of course, tourism is interested in all those decisions too. At the same time, the tourism industry has to provide all these opportunities for us to develop this area and these territories. Our local authorities, the Agency of Tourism, of course, we need to act quickly. Very often, our procedures take long time. For example, the state expertise can take up to 6 months. But at the same time, we need to find solutions for handling wastes. Then we have the transport sector to care about. We need to provide the transport accessibility to this region. At the same time, we have to, once again, care about the environment and provide the proper environmental protection. So from my point of view, we have 4 areas to be addressed in Irkutsk. First of all, we need to make this area attractive. As we've already discussed, we need to come up with interesting events. And if, for example, we look at the last 200 years, most often people, including foreigners, were coming over to the Baikal Lake during the summer period. Thanks to the pandemic, we've discovered the winter Baikal Lake. And, it's a totally different story. It is very interesting. We've held several major events. For example, we played hockey on the Baikal Lake. We attracted lots of colleagues, and the international community responded to that too. For example, the Canadians, they were amazed by this. They were surprised that this is possible. So we need to communicate that Baikal is there, and that will create all the opportunities for people to visit the lake. Because Baikal is a cultural center for many peoples, for the Japanese, for Karelia, for the Mongol people. And then, of course, we need to come up with the infrastructure. We need to attract as much support as we can from the side of business, from the government, from public authorities, and so on. And that's what we are trying to do. Then we have huge national reserves, national parks. All these, in our region, all these parks are located near the Baikal Lake region. There are specific requirements to those parks, and we wanted these requirements to take into consideration both federal and regional requirements. So we need to come up with an integrated agenda. We need to develop touristic routes. We need to provide all the necessary facilities. And for example, this year, for the first time in history, we've addressed all the issues with local townships and settlements. And probably you've heard that we had some tensions. For example, sometimes we didn't have the border the borders and the territories of these townships officially set. So there was no official border between the national park, the national reserve territory, and the township clearly set. And that is why we couldn't do even simple things like, for example, building schools or developing the infrastructure, putting roads. And then we need to give an opportunity of implementing a systematic approach to managing this area. And here, lots of agents from the federal authorities, regional authorities, the municipal authorities have to come in. There were different tensions and agreements, but once we managed to install the systematic approach and duly implement it, the situation clears up and everyone understands their roles. The Irkutsk region, we have outlined our goals for ourselves, and of course we have our priorities there too. For example, we need to strive for providing the economic stability to our region. And then I already mentioned that we are a UNESCO protected object, and some circumstances make it even more difficult for us to address all these matters than comparing to our regions. But at the same time, we have our goals set. So, for example, in terms of the transportation development, the development of our townships and settlements, because people need to understand what conditions they will be living under in the coming years, in the near future. For example, if people know what is going to happen and what the situation will be in 2030, well, they need to have this projection on into the future, and we need to have that projection too. We need to understand how people are going to use these territories. If we come up with the solution for that, the population and the society will take and will accept these solutions and will act accordingly. And wrapping up, I'd like to once again reiterate that we are lucky. We were blessed with the natural resources we have. What we need to come up is an overall scenario of the teamwork that we need to implement. I'll draw the last example. We developed the strategy of development for Baikalsk. And you know, what's important there is for people to know what is going to happen in their city in general. It's not only about handling the waste properly. It's about relocating people. It's about the urban development and everything else. People need to know what city they are going to live in several years, and they know already that they are going to live in the environmentally sustainable city with the wooden houses. Whereas today, for example, they lack very basic infrastructure, like having hot water in their houses all the year round, for example. Today, they don't have hot water during the summer season. So what we're going to do is we're going to develop this area in co-creation, with the approach of co-creation as opposed to the approach of the conflict of interests. So we want to agree upon all the goals, and that's what we need to communicate to the population, and that's what we need to agree at the federal level. Me, as a governor, I'm interested in solving these issues and these conflicts. That's what we need to attain the goals we've set for ourselves from the point of view of the development and providing security and safety. Thank you very much. Indeed, on one hand, it is very important for population to understand the regional development strategy, but at the same time, if we want our people to live for a long time, to live in good health and for many years, it's very important for them to know what kind of water they are drinking, whether it's clean or not, because we can develop and come up with different projects for as long as we want to, but why don't we have clean water in those areas very often? It's because the waste treatment infrastructure is not in place in those settlements and townships. When we have proper sanitary conditions provided in houses in those townships and settlements in place, then we'll have clean water. Unfortunately, we do not have any kind of sewage reform for not a single one out of those areas and townships. I don't see either any program addressing local tourism to prevent people from leaving their household footprint in forests. And to provide proper sanitary conditions for tourists. Well, Olga, I've already said that we are at the very initial stage. Answer. Well, I think that we just need to say that out loud, because the footprint of one cow is comparable to a footprint of a car. It's not me who invented that. A Canadian farmer said that if you, for example, feed your cows with seaweed, then you will reduce the greenhouse gas emissions by 40%. Then it is also about our approach to restaurants and handling waste there, or the hospitality industry and the materials that we use to build the hotels, because, you know, it is also about energy sources that we use, whether it's solar or it's the local grid that we're using. Well, indeed, all these things are interrelated. It depends on the measures and the approaches that we implement. But in fact, we have yet another expert present together with us, Ekaterina Pronicheva, head of the tourism department. If I may, I would like to chip in just with the one last comment. I would like to invite you and all the other experts to the Baikal Lake. In March, we traditionally hold a ice hockey match on the Baikal Lake. And, you know, we've made the first step. We've looked at all the weak points that we have in our system. And I've already said that we've recently discovered the winter Baikal, and it is not less attractive comparing to the summer version of the same lake. Okay, that was a minute of commercial from your side. Well, yes, if you put it that way, but I'd like to agree with Olga as well. Indeed, today we perceive the burden of both tourism and the burden on the environment imposed by the local population. So, right you are, we need to come up with the standard for sewage systems organized in those townships and settlements. Sorry, if you continue for 1 minute longer, I think Ekaterina will not forgive us for that. Thank you very much indeed. We are very we are short of time here, and we are glad to have all the speakers today with us. So, Ekaterina, your assessment and your point of view is very important for me personally because in Moscow we see the whole range of different practices being present and implemented. We have different references and examples here. So we have 5 minutes, and after that we will be wrapping up.
As we don't have a lot of time left, and we can talk about tourism for a very lengthy period of time, especially about this responsible tourism idea. But I'd like to come back to the topic which was mentioned by Olga when she talked about the research made by Booking.com in 2021. Why is that important? This research can answer our question, can green tourism be the tourism of the future? And I think in 2021, despite the pandemic and thanks to the new demand for responsible consumption, not only from Russian citizens, but from global citizens. So we want to be more responsible towards the destinations we travel to. We need to, on the basis of that, take certain measures. So Olga mentioned that 61% of people polled, they want to go only to hotels that are sustainable, but 84% of those interviewed wanted to reduce the amount of waste generated during their trip, and 90% of people make something to achieve that. And if we are talking about Russia, 74% of those surveyed in Russia wanted in the future to reduce the amount of weight, and 54% would want in the future to consume things which are produced locally. So they want to consume products that were manufactured in the place where they traveled to. It means that the demand is already there. And I think that right now we've mentioned already all the key factors during this discussion. What could be done by the government? The people know what they want. And now the government, the state, can follow 3 different tracks. First of all, the governmental policy. And we have the strategy of developing the tourism industry until 2035, and the sustainable development, which is the respect to environmental condition of territories in Russia, respect to diversity in Russia, the ban on the excessive tourism. So these are existing rules. We need standards. Olga mentioned that, and we all know very well that we need standards that would allow us in Russia, in different territories of Russia, to use sustainable principles in a targeted way. And the third thing, what could be done? We can inform people, we can raise awareness. As Olga mentioned, according to the research by Booking.com, there is this green leaf marker which would characterize the hotels which fulfill the responsibility sustainable development criteria. And this could be used by tourists. That's a good idea to also mark different accommodations or tourism operators or participating of tourism programs with this special label. They will be labeled as companies and destinations that exist and operate in line with the sustainable development criteria. And people would choose them knowing that they won't harm the environment by traveling. And the last measure, that's the measure of support, which should be more systemic. And here we need to have the more targeted approach, addressing needs of different regions. So these 3 main tracks that I've mentioned, how are they implemented in Moscow. Moscow is one of the global leaders in digitalization and urban planning, development of public spaces. Starting from 2018, Moscow participated in the project of the Organization of International Cooperation, which is called the General Approach to Sustainable Development. So Moscow got the special certificate for the sustainable development of communities, urban quality of services, because not just the environment is important for sustainable development of tourism, but the comfort of city dwellers, those who are living in this city, that's also important. And sustainable cities, that's the second certificate, which was granted to Moscow. They are international ISO standards. Moscow is a member of two unions, CIS 40, 40 global cities. There are also Chicago, New York, Paris, Stockholm, and other largest megacities in the world. And this organization is trying to tackle the global problems related to the environmental issues, popularization of global green measures, and the measures taken by megacities. And Moscow is very active in the work of this organization. And there is another idea. We understand that we need national standards of the sustainable development, and we need to make sure that industries know about the standards. We are members of the GCTC Council, Sustainable Development Council, and we start developing unique standards which are applicable to Moscow. We will audit the situation in Moscow in order to achieve the compliance with GCTC standards. And they will be applicable to restaurants, hotels, and some other facilities. And it's extremely important that as a result of participating in this project, we will have our own standards, local standards. And we plan to work with the industry, different industries specifically, because we want to have mechanisms of engaging industries with the standards. And as Olga said before, lots of businesses are following the sustainability principles, but they don't know about it. They don't understand that they are sustainable principles. And our goal is to stimulate others to use such principles. We need to stimulate demand, because we should tell people that they can use services which are aimed, which know how to ensure sustainability for the environment. We are creating such standards for Moscow right now, and we invite every one of you to work with us, because I think that's something that could be interesting for everyone. We want to have the networking platforms, and we want to have the rules of raising awareness for people, domestic tourists and international tourists, and this is our goal for this year. But naturally, the main goal for the sustainable tourism development, that's knowing what are the interests of a certain individual. We need to know interests of Muscovites, and all the sustainability principles are based on them. We understand that tourism, and especially over-tourism, and for Moscow it's not a problem now, but it could emerge in the future. For example, in the year 2021, more than 15 million guests visited Moscow. It's really a lot, but in 2019 there were 25 million guests. It's also a rather significant inflow of tourists. It was the year before the pandemic. And right now we have the decentralization of the tourism program, because we're telling tourists about some sites outside of downtown. We also do a lot to engage citizens. We want them to be loyal towards tourists, people who visit the city. So we have the program Show Moscow to tourists, and Moscovites become co-authors of guide programs. And it's great that such opportunities exist. We work with specific hotels, and I do understand we have limited time right now. That's a very interesting topic, and I would like to say that I think the critical factors of success are developing of the standards, implementation of that standards, because we need to all to be on the same page terminology with regards to terminology. We need to understand what sustainability programs are there and how different businesses could join them. We should work with industries, define principles, explain why sustainability is important, and explain why it's economically viable. So we need to provide advertising for such programs. And we, of course, need governmental measures of support, because tourism industry is really the one which suffered during the pandemic. We have just 4 minutes left. And possibly we can talk about some dedicated event in Moscow which will be organized with the help of your department. Maybe we could have another set of panelists. There will be more experts on the topic. Maybe that's possible that you organize such an event if your schedule allows that. That's a great idea. I would be happy to invite you to be co-creators of such a round table on sustainable tourism, and we will be able to define the rules of the game, and we will be able to define our role in the global process of sustainable development of tourism. Okay, that's great. We agreed that we will meet in another format at an event organized by your department. The Agency of Strategic Initiatives, and now I'm trying to address all the regions and entrepreneurs, those who live in the regions, if they are already implementing sustainable principles. So I'd like to urge you to learn more about our programs. We will try to unite all the practices, decisions, technologies, as we want to create a catalog which will be in demand for businesses, for authorities, and for those who want to build a private house following the principles of sustainable development. That's very important. We also plan to work with the regions when we launch an educational program, when we are preparing for the big grant program. Rostourism will provide financial grants, and the regions will have their own competitions, trying to identify the projects that will be supported. And that's great that if we have the list of criteria, if we create them in the work in cooperation with regions, and then we will move forward faster. This will be the stimulus for businesses. This will be also the great excuse for the regions to develop, because the region will be able to talk about new projects. This will be the upgrade of projects, and the citizens will be proud of their region. They will believe that the life will look differently. And then we would be able to create a voluntary certification system for restaurants, for hotels, and so on. I would say it will be very interesting for international tourists as well, because at standards, they are in high demand. For example, yesterday we have this elevation of the visa processes with Dubai, and this could be another factor which will invite more tourists. I'd like to thank all of you to participate in the forum. So I turned out to be a moderator today. I learned a lot of new things today, and I'd like to continue the same discussion on a working basis. At the committee of the State Duma, we want to have lots of experts who have good expertise, because we want to have correct legislation which takes into account your knowledge. We'd like to use your expert opinion. I'd like to thank all the audience. Thank you for being with us. And Gaidar Forum, that's great that we had an opportunity to have this discussion. Thank you.